hold on. I've lost internet.
Maybe go to it.
Matt, okay. Okay, 1 second. I got bumped off of here. What kind of thing you want? What kind of thing you want? I'm back in. I got bumped off the internet. All set? Welcome, everybody, to the 2023 WNBA Draft presented by State Farm. We will begin with opening remarks from Commissioner Cathy Engelbert and then open the floor to questions. Cathy?
Down getting those with the draft prospects. So it's great to be here. This is, I think, one of the most exciting nights on the WNBA calendar. We're going to watch a group of extremely talented athletes really get ready to start the next phase of their basketball journey. And I've had such fun with them today and also had fun calling them all. And when you call them, by the way, this is the best part about my job. You know their reaction. Like I'm inviting you for the first time live to the WNBA Draft in New York City, and it's like, you know, this is my dreams come true. Thank you, and things like that. And I'm so honored, and I can't wait to, you know, be there. So, but obviously, as you know, we're doing a lot to prepare for the 2023 season, our 27th. A lot to be excited about. Nothing more important than having Brittney Griner back here home safely with her family and preparing to come back on the court to the game that we all know that she loves. So we're excited for that. Also, we're globalizing our game. You saw we're going to have our upcoming first ever preseason game in Canada on May 13th. And then we're seeing new faces, star players in new places, an exciting free agency period, which I know you've all written about. We've expanded the regular season to 40 games. So really a lot to look forward to. And you might have seen today our little announcement about expanding our charter flight program for players this season. And so we're continuing. I talk a lot to you all and this group about continuing to expand the economic model for this league. We raised that capital. We're deploying against key initiatives, which I'll talk about in a moment. And as I've said from day one, we've been working hard to then return that to the player experience. So this season, as announced earlier today, we will have charter flights for all postseason games. Remember, now we have a best of 3 first round, a best of 5 semifinal round, and obviously our best of 5 WNBA finals. So we'll also have, again, charter for the WNBA Commissioner Cup and for the back-to-backs this year requiring air travel during the regular season. So this is something we've been working on since, I want to say I've come to the league, but certainly hard on the last year. And then, you know, long-term growth is the way you fund things like this, and it's really important. Obviously in 2019, we approved a couple charters when they were needed on west to east playoff games. And last year we had charters for the WNBA finals and Commission Cup. But it was always our goal to broaden the program, and I feel good about how we're growing the league. And when you grow the league, you grow revenue, it drops to the bottom line, you can fund things like this. So we'll look to do more in the future, as I said earlier today. And as you know, sponsors and media companies all play a role in this as well. And it's not just coming up with money for 1 year, like a lot of people are talking about. This is creating a sustainable model and a charter program that can essentially continue in perpetuity. So we will fund this at the league level. I know that was a question, because I feel good about where we are and the strength coming out of 2 tough COVID years into last year, a record-breaking year for us from a viewership and a consumption and you know, the most consumed season in 20 years. So the transformation of the league is happening and it's working. And I know a lot of people want instantaneous improvement and change, but and I want that too, but as I know, growing a business does take patience and time, and the transformation's happening. So, we also always look for other ways to pay the players more, like the Commissioner Cup bonus pool, like the playoff bonus pool, which we upped by over 50% last year, expanded player marketing agreements this year, where we have players actually had over 100 opportunities available for players who want to co-market with the league to activate with our league partners and during league events. And some of you that were at the end, covered the NBA All-Stars saw a big presence for some of our PMA players there. PMA is our acronym for player marketing agreements. And this all helps to grow their personal brands. We had Kelsey Mitchell here earlier when we lit the Empire State Building orange. Make sure you see that tonight. And then we have Dee Dee Richards here, who was walking the orange carpet with the draftees. So this is all to help build their personal brands. They get personal endorsements. You'll see more WNBA players in ads of our partners, like a State Farm, a CarMax, an AT&T, and others. So I think you're going to continue to see a lot of that. And you all feel it, I know, but the great momentum around women's sports right now, we're looking to build on that. Obviously, the NCAA viewership at the peak over 12 million and 9.9 million average viewers, so this is great. But as I've mentioned before, the regular season expanded to 40 games. That creates more touch points for fans, which is great. The chance for more league growth. In addition to the ESPN network broadcast, we will have 9 games on ABC this year. And for the first time ever, the WNBA All-Star Game will be broadcast on ABC in prime time from Las Vegas. So we're also going to have 4 national games on CBS television network. That'll be an all-time high for us. And just again, really pleased that our corporate partners and our media partners are really stepping up for the W. And as for expansion, because I know that's on your list during the Q&A, we are progressing nicely, I will say. Earlier this year, you saw that you probably saw I visited Portland. Next month, I'll be in Toronto. My plan is to continue to visit a few more markets in the coming months with groups that we're having discussions with potential ownership groups that have showed interest. I feel really good. I'm glad we didn't rush into this coming off of those 2 COVID years and the Olympic year, because I think we're all going to benefit from it. And certainly the new expansion teams will benefit from not rushing into something before we were ready. So again, opening tip, the first weekend of games will be presented by CarMax. They're becoming a great partner of the WNBA. And then we have our change makers, WNBA change makers, AT&T, Deloitte, Nike, Google, and US Bank, who are all activating around a lot of our tentpole events this year. So off a record amount of sponsors last year, we're adding more this year, and the growth we're seeing as a league, I'm really pleased with. And I always like to talk about the work the players are doing. I call it, player-led and league facilitated in the social justice space. So the Social Justice Council in 2023, this is a player-led council, will concentrate their efforts on women's health, maternal health, a focus on advocacy in the Black, Brown, and LGBTQ+ communities. So always proud of what our players do. They're never one and done. They always want to focus on something where they're really going to make a difference in the communities in which they live and work. You might have seen a little bit of news around that preseason game I talked about earlier in Canada between the Minnesota Lynx and the Chicago Sky. First time since 2011 we'll play an international game, and the first time ever in Canada. We're expecting a sold out crowd for a preseason game. Think of that, over 20,000 people. So from what I understand, tickets sold out in minutes. We released them in 2 different tranches, and we know fans around the world are hungry for WNBA games. We're currently air games in 207 countries. I didn't even know that, by the way, when I came into the league. So we see this as 207 countries and territories. We see this as a real way to globalize the game and start to figure out how, because we know WNBA players are ambassador for the games around the world. I've been to the State Department where they talked to me about one of the most requested places as they liaise with embassies around the world is women's basketball, and bringing these role models into these countries that can help get their game where we have it here in the United States with the WNBA and our college games. So you'll also see this year we deployed some capital against an important area, which was fan engagement and our fan experience and our digital capabilities, which quite frankly needed to be totally transformed. So You'll see a revamped WNBA app and WNBA.com, which will unveil ahead of the tip of the season later in May. And this is all tailored for cleaner, improved design, all tailored with the fan in mind. We got input from fans. We really took that input, game highlights to behind the scenes, videos and content. We all know content is king, rich visuals, enhanced storytelling. So again, this is all to bring fans closer to the court. We're only in 12 cities. We need to bring all of our fans. We have cities where we have more fans than maybe in our W cities that really want to consume our content. So bringing them closer and having them follow, again, what we hope we're building into these household names of the WNBA players. Also new this year on the court will be the Coaches Challenge, which affords coaches the ability to trigger instant replay review on a limited set of matters. Think about it like what the NBA has around the Coaches Challenge. That'll give our coaches more of a voice and further engagement. I think will help the pace of the game because now a coach will have to trigger a challenge. So that'll be great to institute this year and something that came out of our competition committee meetings in the fall. So in closing, I really want to thank you for your continued coverage. I mean, the work you do does mean a lot personally to me because we couldn't do it without you all. So now that COVID is largely behind us, I say that with an asterisk, we are going to be announcing some modifications to the league's media policies, which will include an improved, more efficient post-game interview format through which all players must be made available to media, and the addition of new required elements for pregame and the game day shoot-around media sessions. So, whereas in recent sessions, in-person Zoom post-game press conferences featuring a team's head coach and key players occurred at the same time as the locker room access, now they'll run consecutively rather than, the availability periods will run consecutively rather than concurrently. So now following the conclusion of the post-game press conference, any additional players requested for in-person media will be required to be available for interviews, either in the interview room outside the locker room or in a suitable location arranged by the team. So an alternate suitable. What we're trying to do is we're trying to modernize now that we came off the kind of quirky COVID period, we're trying to modernize and streamline, quite frankly, how you have access to our players. This is something we're trying to provide for more media coverage by adding these new required elements. And teams will now be required to have 2 players available in Zoom for the shoot-around media sessions, in addition to access for the in-person media. So important that we'll be putting something out about that shortly, but it's important that what we're trying to do, we took feedback from you all, from our players, from the Players Association, from our teams, because our team personnel hold a big burden, and this is something that we're going to do on a trial basis this year, and then as things work or don't work, we'll make adjustments. So I just wanted to mention that because I know that's important that you have the access that you want to the players that you want at the times that you want, and so we're going to work hard on that. So again, with that, I'm going to open up. I know that was a lot. I'm going to open it up. Thank you again for all your reporting and coverage. I'm going to open it up for some Q&A. So Ron, back to you.
Cathy, our first few questions will come from the left side of the room. First row to your left.
Hey, Cathy, Kareem Copeland, Washington Post. I want to ask about the big news of the day, obviously, that you just touched on. Could you share more details about the sustainable model? Because obviously the funds have been the issue in the past, and you said, hey, we've gotten to a point where we can do it now and in the future, and also always looking ahead and always wanting more. Is part of the game plan the next step of having not just back-to-backs, the full regular season, and what it takes to kind of get to that point?
Thank you, Kareem. So there's no one that wants the full season and full playoffs more than I do. But again, as I said, and Kareem's question is the right one, like talk about how do you build a sustainable model to fund it? Because remember, travel is an operating expense. It's an operating expense on your budgets and your company's budgets, and an operating expense on our budget. And it's not something typically you can go out and get funded through either equity investment, debt investment. It has to come from the revenues of the company. Every place I've ever worked, every client I ever served in my prior life, that's how you build, that's how you fund operating expenses. So it has to come from revenue and revenue growth if you're going to expand it. So I feel comfortable. We've been growing revenue at the league, which is why I feel comfortable with this particular program this year. And yes, in the longer term, as we look at a next media rights deal, as we get more corporate partners at more significant amounts, as we drive the valuation of our franchises up. You saw the news when Seattle did their capital raise this year. They had a post-money valuation of 150 million. That's being driven by their revenue, which is being driven by the lift that we're all seeing in the momentum in women's sports. So this is how you fund things like this: is build a revenue model, have take a look at expenses too, but have enough drop to the bottom line that you feel comfortable funding something for a decade or more. And that's how we're looking at all of our expenses, not just charter travel, but all travel experiences, because there's other things the players would want too as they travel that we'll take a look at over time. So yes, we intend to do more, as I said in the release today, but we do need some patience and time to build it so that we feel comfortable funding something more substantial as we get into our ensuing years. Now, next year will be a challenge because it's an Olympic year. And so that's always a challenge because we have to take a month off, or approximately a month off from the league as we support our national team players, not just in the USA women's national team, but also in the, we have, I think last year we had 23 players from 13 different foreign countries. So this year, obviously rosters aren't set yet, and when we get that number, we'll provide it, but we're globalizing our player population as well. And as we think about, what that means going forward. So I look forward to continuing the conversation, but it'll always be on the list for me until we get the full program.
Kathy, to your left, second row.
Alexa Philippou, ESPN. I have a two-part question for you. One, we saw some college seniors decide to go back and use their fifth year COVID eligibility instead of going into the draft. And I know that COVID year won't be a factor down the line, but there is a discourse that some of these college athletes would have a better kind of lifestyle if they stay in college versus go to the WNBA. So I was curious what your response to that kind of discourse and that conversation is. And my second question is, when you look at the momentum that you saw from the Final Four in particular, where do you think the league and the the league and the college game can have synergy and work together to kind of capitalize on the moment as a whole?
Right, thanks. So there's a lot being obviously talked about and written, and what a great day to be talking all the time about momentum and players staying, players coming. I think we have a fabulous draft class this year. I mean, everyone we were kind of looking at that to come into the league, and I think our general managers were looking at is in this draft class this year. Obviously, there were a few that decided to stay. Look, I was a Division I both college basketball player and lacrosse player, and if I could have played for one more year, by the way, if I could go back and play today at the age of 58, I would go back and play today. So I totally understand it. I understand the opportunities to stay in college, but I think, again, we're going to have such depth in our next few draft classes. So I'm not worried about the extra COVID year. I think next year technically is the last year of the extra COVID year. And so if players decide to stay, I think some players were maybe looking at where they might fall in the draft class, things like that. So I think it's great that we have these options and we have the depth in this league and the quality of play in this league. And just your question on coming off of the NCAA outstanding March Madness tournament. I was in Dallas. It was amazing. It was everything you thought it was going to be, but even more, I thought. And then the viewership being on ABC on Sunday, and we do so great when we're on ABC as well at the WNBA. But we do need to do, as I've stood up here and said before, a great job of taking kind of some of these really star players who have huge followership, whether it's through their NIL deals or just through their social media following. And remember, the NIL deals have been actually a positive for, I think, players coming into our league. If they have national brands like a Gatorade or a Nike, they're our partners too. They can come in with those NIL deals, and then they can get activated even more broadly, because those are our deals. Now, when they're local deals for just the local area, maybe that's not as relevant. But certain these national NIL deals, I think, and I was wrong about that. I thought, oh, it's just another area for women to be undervalued in sports, but I was wrong about that because the NCAA women's basketball players have been highly successful in signing these NIL deals, and I think it's a huge positive for us. And so we'll welcome them in, and especially they're building their personal brands. They come in with a huge following, social media following, and look at some of these generational players that are going to come in the next 2 years. So I think the attention on the women's basketball game, I went from the Final Four in Dallas to the Masters, and everybody at the Masters was talking about women's basketball. It was pretty incredible. And now we have to make sure we take these great players, and as they come into our league, we continue to market them, put the marketing dollars behind them. I know Phil Cook, our CMO, is working very hard on making sure that integration from the NCAA into the WNBA is something we can take advantage of, that momentum, rather than what we might have done in prior years, which is, okay, now they're in our league and they kind of are on a team where you don't have that loyalty of that college town following them. Now we got to bring those fans along with us, and I think the attention this year on the March Madness tournament for the women's national champion. Think about LSU and 102 points. And how many points were scored in the men's final? 72. Think about that, 30 more points in the same amount of time scored by LSU. And just what a great testament to the quality of the game and these players coming into our league.
Cathy, next question, third row to your left.
Cathy, Doug Feinberg, DAP. I was hoping you might have to say a little more on the expansion. We've talked about it for about 3 years now, saying it's progressing nicely and things are going well and we're finding the right fits and stuff. Do you have a timetable? And other women's leagues seem to be expanding at a very rapid rate, which may not be the best choice for them, but it seems there are people out there who want to have franchises. So do you have a sort of timetable saying, hey, I'd love to have this done by X period or Y period?
Right, and as soon as I give a timetable, I assure you it won't be right, so I'm not going to give a timetable. But as I said, and we might have been talking about it, Doug, but as you know, I have a philosophy that we needed to have more transformation of the league economics, because the last thing we want to do is bring new owners in who are going to fail. And I had a philosophy, and I think it was the right one, because I think the valuations are going up for all of our teams and all of our assets, because it's not just about a valuation of a franchise. It's the patch on the uniform, it's a placement on the court, it's an ad buy, it's a media right fee, all the things that new owners coming into the league from these cities that we think will be great cities in the for the WNBA will benefit from. So I am so glad we didn't rush it. Yes, now it's time to really get into the due diligence phase with some of these cities, some of these ownership groups, start deciding on what an expansion draft might look like. We've got great drafts coming up in the next few years. So as I've said, yes, I'd love to bring in at least 2 teams over the next few years and maybe longer term 4. So that's where we are today, and that's what we're working on.
Cathy, next question to your right in the first row.
Hey, Commissioner, always a pleasure to hear from you. You started your remarks talking about Brittney Griner, and I think it's safe for all of us to say that she's gone through an experience that's truly unprecedented, certainly for this league, and which we hope we don't see again. To that extent, though, have there been any considerations that the league or the Phoenix Mercury in particular have made, whether it's with respect to Brittney's transition or to safety and just kind of media concerns with regard to her unique situation?
Yeah, so I'm glad you just used that word unique, because I think her situation is unique. I was able to spend about 2.5 hours with Brittney a month or so ago, talking with her about her return to the league, talking about physical, mental, all the things. Obviously, her story is going to be incredible when she chooses to share it. She is just inspiring, that's all I'll say. And yes, we've been working substantially with our security experts, with the Phoenix Mercury, with Brittney's team, about, given her unique conditions, about some things that we'll do this year. By nature of the fact that it's a security plan, it'll be confidential. We're not going to share the details of that security plan. Obviously, people will know where she's playing and when. Does that mean we're wrapping up? Where she's playing and when, but we'll keep those, but rest assured we're working on, because it is a unique situation, and I think we all want to protect all of our players, so we're looking at additional security for all of our players, not just Brittney, but Brittney definitely being a unique case this year. So yes, we've worked on that plan, and we're putting some finishing touches as we get into training camp and then into the regular season, but thank you.
Cathy, next question will come from the second row to your left.
Hey, Cathy, Jackie Powell with the Next. The Final Four, as you said, it introduced us to some future WNBA players. Some are here tonight and some are not, but will be in the future. So I'm just curious, with the current roster size system, how you're looking at making sure some of these new and talented players that come in with talent, but also social capital, have room in the league.
Yeah, it's a great question. We're often asked about that roster size question. We think today our rosters are the right size. We've talked obviously with the Players Association about that. We've talked about the 22-year age. We've talked about a lot of different things as we're thinking about the league quite differently than we thought about it in the past. But I think for now, the roster sizes are set certainly for this season into next, but that'll be sure a discussion in the next round of collective bargaining, as will a variety of other issues. And I think with expansion on the horizon, my personal view is to give 12 to 24 and hopefully more roster spots will be something obviously that expansion will afford us. So to do something shorter term with roster size for the 12 teams versus bringing in 24 new players or opportunities for 24 players, I think is the right answer. And it helps, again, extend us into 2 new cities where you expand fandom. And that just all is part of transforming and growing the league versus adding a spot here or there, which actually doesn't do any of that, quite frankly. So it does give a few opportunities to a few more players, but I think in this case, we're looking to expand the opportunities for players broadly, and one of the ways to do that is expansion. So that's what we'll be looking at in the future.
All right, we have a few more questions from the room before we go to Zoom. Second row, Cathy, to your right.
Cathy, I've been picking from The Athletic. Do you just have an update on the league's investigation into the Las Vegas Aces, what the status of it is, and if there's any information you can share?
So obviously, one thing I learned in my prior life where I had to conduct a lot of investigations, and now is that these things do take time. So the investigation is ongoing. We will definitely share an update when it's ready. I am letting the lawyers do their work, and so no update at this time, but the investigation is ongoing. No timeline either, because again, depending on the outcome of the investigation, but we will share the findings when we've completed the investigation.
Cathy, first row to your right.
This is Ralph Iguanota, but that's supposed to talk. Very nice seeing you today. I want to get your overall impressions about the type of draft class that about to enter the WNBA this season.
My thoughts on the draft class?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So into defending a certain defending champion from LSU.
Yeah. So the overall draft class, is that the question, is on the overall draft class. And I think the quality of the draft class is outstanding. The personalities of this draft class, as I've learned today by spending the day off and on with them, is great. I think you're going to see, obviously there's, you all have your mock drafts, and I know you know these players and what they're capable of on the court. I think you're going to see them integrate and assimilate into the league very quickly. I think you're going to see a lot of them fighting for starting positions. I think it's going to be a tough choice on Rookie of the Year already this year, and I'm going to tell each of them when I come up and read their names that's their goal is to get into training camp, work hard, and make a roster and ultimately get a starting position. And I think you'll see that in this class this year. They're really, really talented class. And again, there's all the discussion on roster sizes and expansion, but you want to make sure you're doing it not in just adding just because you don't want to degrade the quality of the game, because that's one thing that's important to protect. And I don't think the quality's ever been better of this game right now, the women's game, both at the collegiate and the professional level. So that's why I think this draft class is going to be great, and the next few years is going to be great. But we've got some veterans out there that are going to be vying for those same roster spots who are playing at the highest level of their game as well. So it's going to be an interesting season to see what's happening with the teams and the free agency, and now these rookies coming in fighting for those spots. So I think it's going to be great. Thank you.
Cathy, next question, second row center.
Hi, Cathy. Howard Magdalton next. Thanks for taking the time. I just want to jump off of Ben's question briefly about it, because what's been alleged, obviously, in the Las Vegas investigation speaks directly to competitive balance. So just purely from that perspective, how important do you think it is to have a resolution prior to the season?
Yeah, again, I do think we'd love to have a resolution prior to the season tip. Again, I'm letting the lawyers do their work. That's what a commissioner should do. These things do take time, but I agree. I don't disagree with that. It would be important to get a resolution by the season tip. We're working hard on that. These are complicated investigations, typically that require a lot of time and interviews of a lot of different people. So Yeah, and just to the competitive balance thing, I mean, I think everybody's talking about the 2 super teams out there, but I see some teams that we're going to have a ton of competitive balance in this league this year, and a ton of parity, just like the college game had this year, with #1 seeds losing. That didn't happen in the women's game 5-10 years ago. Just really proud of the product that's on the court right now, both at the collegiate level and as a feeder system into the WNBA.
All right, we'll turn to Zoom for a couple of minutes. We're going to start with Annie. Annie, you'll be followed by Jackie. Annie, go ahead.
Hey, Cathy, thank you so much for your time. Sorry, I'm not there in person, but you kind of talked about the carryover of the momentum from this year's college basketball season, as many fan favorite players enter the W this year and another group right behind them next year. Curious, can you be more specific about what the league's going to do to capitalize on that momentum? Obviously, the media contract runs through 2025, but before that, what the league is really going to do to capitalize on this momentum?
Yeah, the #1 thing to capitalize on the momentum is to continue the plan around marketing the players into household names and building rivalries. We have an enormous opportunity this year to build fandom around rivalries in this league. And so no matter which team a fan might be following, we've got to build compelling content so that that rivalry or those players that you follow are part of what you want to do every other night or every third night as these players get on the court, and we get the viewership and we get the fans in the seats. That's the #1 thing, especially in advance of thinking about all the disruption in the broadcast and media world around linear, around streaming. Streamers are being disrupted because they were disrupting linear. Households using TVs, people using TVs are going down. But what does that mean? More people are using the devices that they have to stream games, and we've got to be in that game as well. So those are all the things that we need to capitalize on the momentum. And there's no doubt, like what just happened with the NCAA and the number of viewers for both that Friday night, the Sunday night, and just the enormous capitalization on people waking up to say, this game is great. And people now who have watched it, they'll come back. And how do you get, again, digitally engage a fan? How do you get younger fans who will be the ultimate consumers of tomorrow to be digitally engaged in our game? And so all of that is exactly what our strategy is all about. It's all about transforming the digital part, the fandom, bringing the fan experience, bringing fans closer to players. Again, when you're only in 12 cities in a country of our size and scale, you've got to work really hard to bring fans from outside those 12 cities, and that loyalty you see at the college level. And how do you transition that into the professional level? And those are all the things we're working on. But it ultimately comes down to marketing, building household names, rivalries. And these players are killing it on building their personal brands. And social media helps us with that. And, I was joking today, someone was put me on TikTok, and I go, I guess now I need to get a TikTok account. So, it really is important to that younger fan to see our players across those platforms, because that's how they're consuming their content. Short form, medium form. We've got a lot of interest in documentaries and docuseries on our players, on our league. We're entertaining all of those right now to see if we can, again, draw in that casual fan. Sports betting, fantasy basketball, that's, again, drawing a different fan into our game. So I think it's all coming together at the right moment, but those are the types of things we're thinking of to capitalize.
Our next question, also from Zoom, will come from Jackie. Jackie, you'll be followed by Charles. Jackie, go ahead.
Hey, Commissioner, Jackie Ray, Nightcast Media. I just wanted to ask real quick, we talk a lot about players being paid properly, and I know that's important, but when you think about the importance and the impact of someone like Becky Hammon, how much emphasis are we placing on making sure that coaches can see the WNBA as a first option and maybe not a stepping stone, and that we can pay them properly so they can make the impact as well?
It's an excellent question, and one where clearly Becky is setting the stage as a role model, especially given her number of years in the NBA as assistant coach, and then coming to the WNBA as a head coach, and then winning the championship, the WNBA finals their first year. So really an important question as you think about, but I think a rising tide lifts all boats in this area, especially when you look at the compensation of coaches and assistant coaches, and we're so proud of the diversity we're achieving in our coach and assistant coach. 9 out of 12 of our head coaches are now women, and 77% of our assistant coaches are women. Of that, 70% are women of color or people of color. So really just an amazing transformation of that part of the league, the diversity and that pipeline to feed into becoming the next head coaches, whether it's in the WNBA, which I hope, or even the college game where they struggle a little more with women coaches more broadly, given our numbers. So really proud of what our owners, I mean, this is something the owners actually appoint and pay the coaches, that our owners have stepped up to do. And I think it's something we have our eye on. We had our eye on as soon as I came into the league, and with Bethany Donovan's leadership about diversity in coaching, we've really made enormous strides in a short period of time that I didn't think were possible. Those numbers I threw out are proof that, you know, you can build a pipeline of diverse coaches who are going to really be the future of this game from a coaching perspective, and then pay them. And so that's how I think our owners are thinking of it.
We have time for one more question. That will come from Zoom. Charles, go ahead, please.
Good evening, Cathy. Charles Hall from Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. As much as the players are excited about coming into the draft and this night, can you speak on your emotions about doing the draft for, I think, the third time in your career?
Right. And remember, the first time I did it was in my living room with my 2 children as my stagehands. Literally, we were steaming in my dryer the jerseys right before, because they came all wrinkled in a box. And you know what? It's really good to be here in New York City at Spring Studios. And it's really going to be fun. But personally for me, I mean, calling those players, as I said in my lead-in, calling them, having the excitement in their voices that you are going to make their dreams come true. I met their parents and their families today as well in a session, and they're so excited. And just to see that you can have that impact, and that then they're a role model for future girls and boys to look up to. Favorite part of the job, without a doubt. Handing out the WNBA Finals trophies, great, and the rings, but this night is unique because it's a new chapter in all of the lives of these 36 players who will be drafted tonight. So definitely excited, as you can tell in my voice.
Cathy, thank you very much. And to our media, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Enjoy the draft. Yes.